Chapter 18. For a few moments, I just sat and thought about life's cruel ironies. After so many years of solitary self-reliance, I was suddenly pursued from all directions by hungry women. Deb, Rita, LaGuardia. They were all apparently unable to exist without me. Yet the one person I wanted to spend my quality time with was being coy, leaving Barbie dolls in my freezer. Was any of this fair? I put my hand in my pocket and felt the small glass slide, snug and secure in its ziplock. For a moment, it made me feel a little better. At least I was doing something, and life's only obligation, after all, was to be interesting. I was doing something, and certainly at the moment, it was interesting. It did not begin to describe it. I would trade a year off my life to find out more about this elusive will-o'-the-wisp who was teasing me so mercilessly with such elegant work. In fact, I had come far too close to trading more than a year with my little Jaworski interlude. Yes, things were certainly interesting. And were they really saying in the department that I had a feeling for serial homicide? That was very troubling. It meant my careful disguise might be too close to unraveling. I had been too good too many times. It would become a problem. But what could I do? Be stupid for a while? I wasn't sure I knew how, even after so many years of careful observation. Well, I opened the case file on Jaworski, the poor man. After an hour of study, I came to a couple conclusions. First and most important was going to be getting away with it, in spite of the unforgivable, sloppy impulsiveness of the thing. And second, there might be a way for Deb to cash in on this. If she could prove this was the work of our original artist while LaGuardia committed herself to the copycat theory, Deb could suddenly turn from somebody they didn't trust to get their coffee into flavor of the month. Of course, it was not actually the work of the same guy, but that seemed like a very picky objection at this point. And since I knew without any possibility without a doubt, that there was going to be any more bodies found very soon, it wasn't worth worrying about. And naturally, at the same time, I had to provide the same annoying Detective LaGuardia with enough rope to hang herself, which might also, it occurred to me, come in handy on a more personal level. Pushed into a corner and made to look like an idiot, LaGuardia would come naturally to try to pin the blame on the nitwit lab detect who had given her the erroneous conclusion. Dull, dim Dexter, and my reputation wouldn't suffer a much-needed relapse into mediocrity. Of course, it would not jeopardize my job, since I was supposed to analyze blood spatter, not provide profiling services. That being the case, it would help to make LaGuardia look like a nitwit she was, and raise Deborah's stock even more. Lovely when things work out so neatly. I called Deborah. At 1:30 the next day, I met Deb at a small restaurant a few blocks north of the airport. It was tucked into a little strip mall between an auto parts store and a gun shop. It was a place where we both knew well, not too far from Miami-Dade headquarters, and they made the best Cuban sandwiches in the world right there. Perhaps that seems like a small thing, but I assure you, there are times when only a medianoche will do, and at such times, Cafe Relampago was the only place to get one. The Morgans had been going there since 1974. And I did feel that some small light touch was in order. If not natural celebration, then at least an acknowledgement of things that were looking up ever so slightly. Perhaps it was merely feeling chipper because I had let off a little steam with my ever-dear friend Jaworski, but in any case, I did feel unaccountably good. I even ordered a batido de mame, a uniquely flavored Cuban milk that shakes. Cuban milkshake that tastes something like a combination of watermelon, peach, and mango. Deb, of course, was unable to share my irrational mood. She looked like she had been studying the facial expressions of a large fish, dour and droopy in the extreme. Please, Deborah, I begged her, if you don't stop, your face will be stuck like that. People will take you for a grouper. They're sure not going to take me for a cop, she said, because I won't be one anymore. Nonsense, I said. Didn't I promise? Yeah. You also promised that this was going to work, but you didn't say anything about the looks I'd get from Captain Matthews. Oh, Deb, I said. He looked at you? I'm so sorry. Fuck you, Dexter. You weren't there. It's not your life going down the tubes. I told you it was going to be rough for a while, Debs. Well, at least you were right about that, according to Matthews. I am this close to being suspended. But he did give you permission to use your free time to look into this a little more. She snorted. He said, I can't stop you, Morgan, but I'm very disappointed, and I wonder what your father would have said. And what did you say? My father would have been closed the case with the wrong guy in jail? She looked surprised. No, she said, but I was thinking it. How did you know? But you didn't actually say it, did you, Deborah? No, she said. I pushed her glass towards her. Have some mame, sis. Things are looking up. She looked up at me. You sure you're not just yanking my chain? Never, Deb. How could I? With the greatest of ease. Really, sis, you need to trust me. She held my eye for a moment and then looked down. She still hadn't touched her shake, which was a shame. They were very good. I trust you. But I swear to God, I don't know why. She looked up at me. A strange expression flitting. I've never heard that word. Flitting back and forth across her face. And sometimes I don't really think I should, Dex. I give her my very best reassuring big brother smile. Within the next 2-3 days, something will turn up. I promise. You can't know that, she said. I know I can't, Deb, but I do know. I really do. So why would you sound so happy about it? I wanted to say it because the idea made me happy. Because the thought of seeing more of the bloodless wonder made me happier than anything else I could think of. But of course, that was not a sentiment Deb could really share with me, so I kept myself Naturally, I'm just happy for you. She snorted. That's right. I forget, she said, but at least she took a sip of her shake. Listen, I said, either LaGuerta is right, which means I'm dead and fucked, or LaGuerta is wrong, and you're alive and virginal. With me, so far, sis. She said, remarkably grumpy, considering how patient I was being. If you're a betting gal, would you bet on LaGuerta being right about anything? Maybe about fashion, she said. She dresses really nice. The sandwiches came. The waiter dropped them sourly in the middle of the table without a word and whirled away behind the counter. Still, they were very good sandwiches. They were the best sandwiches. They were the only sandwiches. They were the best sandwiches. I don't know what made them better than all the other medianoches in town, but they were. Bread crisp on the outside and soft on the inside. Just the right balance of pork and pickle. Cheese melted perfectly. Pure bliss. I took a bite. Deborah played with a straw in her shake. I swallowed. Debs, if my deadly logic can't cheer you up and one of Relampago's sandwiches can't cheer you up, then it's too late. You're already dead. She looked at me with her grouper face and took a bite of her sandwich. It's very good, she said without expression. See, cheer me up. The poor thing was not convinced. She was a terrible blow to my ego. But after all, I had fed her on traditional Morgan family delight. I had brought her wonderful news, even if she didn't recognize it as such. If all this had not actually made her smile, well, really, I couldn't be expected to do everything. One other small thing I could do, though, was to feed LaGuerta to something not quite as palatable as one of Relampago's sandwiches, though delicious in its own way. And so that afternoon, I called on the good detective in her office, a lovely little cubby in the corner of a large room containing half a dozen of other little cubbies. Hers, of course, was the most elegant, with several tasteful photographs of herself, with celebrities hanging from the fabric of the partitions. I recognized Gloria Estefan, Madonna, and George Mascanasora. On the desk, on the far side of the jade green blotter with a leather frame, stood an elegant green onyx penholder with a quartz clock in the center. LaGuerta was on the phone speaking rapid-fire Spanish when I came in. She glanced up at me without seeing me and looked away. But after a moment, her eyes came back to me. This time she looked over thoroughly, frowned, and said, Okay. Te luego, which was Cuban for hasta luego. She hung up and continued to look at me. What have you got for me? She said finally. Glad tidings, I told her. If that means good news, I could use some. I hooked a folding chair with my foot and dragged it into her cubby. There is no possible doubt, I said, sitting in the folding chair, that you have the right guy in jail. The murder on Old Cutler was committed by a different hand. Oh no. I lost my place. Okay. Talua, which was Cuban for hasta luego. She hung up and continued to look at me. What have you got for me? She said, finally. Glad tidings, I told her. If that means good news, I could use some. I hooked the folding chair with my foot and dragged it into her cubby. There is no possible doubt, I said, sitting in the folding chair, that you have the right guy in jail. The murder on Old Cutler was committed by a different hand. She just looked at me for a moment. I wondered if it took her that long for her to process the data and respond. You can back that up? She asked me at last. For sure. Of course I could back it up. For sure. But I wasn't going to, no matter how good the confession might be for the soul. Instead, I dropped the folder onto her desk. The facts speak for themselves, I said. There's absolutely no question about it. And of course, there wasn't any question at all. As only I knew very well. Look, I told her, and pulled out a page, carefully selected comparisons that I had typed out. First, the victim is male. All the other victims were female. This victim was found off Old Cutler. All of Mikhail's victims were off the Tommy Trail. This victim was found relatively intact, and the spots where he was killed, Mikhail's victims were completely chopped up, and they were moved to different locations for disposal. I went on, and she listened carefully. The list was a good one. It hadn't taken me several hours to come up with the most obvious, ludicrous, transparently foolish comparisons, and I must say I did a very good job. And LaGuardia did her part wonderfully, too. She brought the whole thing. Of course, she was hearing what she wanted to hear. To sum up, I said, this new murder has the fingerprints of a revenge killing, probably drug-related. The guy in jail did the other murders, and they are absolutely, positively, 100% finished and over forever. Never happening again. Case closed. I dropped the folder on her desk and held out my list. She took the paper from me and looked at it for a long moment. She frowned. Her eyes moved up and down the page a few times. One corner of her lower lip twitched. Then she placed it carefully on her desk under a heavy jade green stapler. Okay, she said, straightening the stapler so it was perfectly aligned with the edge of her blotter. Okay, pretty good. This should help. She looked at me again with her frown of concentration still stitched in place, and then suddenly smiled. Okay, thank you, Dexter. It was such an unexpected and genuine smile that if I only had a soul, I'm sure I would have felt quite guilty. She stood still, smiling, and before I could retreat, she had flung her arms around my neck to give me a hug. I really do appreciate it, she said. You make me feel very grateful. And she rubbed her body against mine in a way that could only be called suggestive. Surely there could be no question here she was, a defender of public morality, and yet right here in public, and even in the privacy of a bank vault, I would have been truly uninterested in being rubbed up by her body. Not to mention the fact that I had just handled her a rope with the hope that she would use it to hang herself, which hardly seemed like some sort of thing that one would celebrate by, but, well, really. Had the whole world gone mad? What is it with humans? Is this all of them ever thinks about feeling something very close to panic? I tried to disentangle myself. Please, detective. Coming media, she said, clinging and rubbing harder. She reached a hand down to the front of my pants, and I jumped. Oh my god. On the plus side, my actions dislodged the amorous detective. On the negative side, she spun sideways, hit the desk with her hip, and tripped over her chair, landing sprawled out on the floor. I'm not gonna lie. The LaGuardia deserves that shit. I really have to get back to work, I stammered. There's an important, however, I couldn't think of anything more important than running for my life, so I backed out of the cubicle, leaving her looking after me. It didn't seem to be particularly a friendly look. Yo, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. And thank you also for listening and staying a part of this. You are part of the 48sharks community, and I just want to have fun and show you guys, like, yo, it's so fine. It's it's fine to be yourselves and enjoy. I'm reading this book, and I began reading this book, Dexter, and like I've seen the show, all of the seasons, like at least every season, at least 5 times, but not until you guys, the ones that are watching, the ones that are commenting, not until you guys literally started requesting, like, and asking me, hey, are you going to keep, like, going through? Like, not until that point did I realize how impactful actually, like, reading this to you guys is. Like, yeah, cool, it's cool for myself, but, like, so many other people also enjoy this. So, again, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you don't have a little notification bell, please click that. That'll let you know when I post more stuff. And hey, man, I want to start conversations with you guys. So drop a comment. Let's start a conversation. Let's start an actual conversation. Worst case scenario, somebody learns from that conversation, from that talk. Let's get it. 2025, baby. Quarter of a century.